happen. This relates to sort of deep reasons within the Palestinian culture, society, history. It's not going to happen. And so you can call for negotiations till you're blue in the face. You can put all the pressure you want to on Israel. At the end of the day, if there's no Palestinian leadership to emerge and sign the dotted line, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's one problem. But imagine just for a second that even if there were a Palestinian leadership that was going to sign on the dotted line, you have a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, you'd have a state of Israel. You would not have a solution for the 6 to 8 million Palestinian refugees. You'd have Syria and Iran backing those who rejected the agreement. And it would not eliminate the basic conflict between the Middle East and Western modernity, which is a fabulously complex and deep-seated animosity that has nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. So I always say that Americans should get up every morning and say, well, little blessing that Israel is there running interference for the West. If Israel wasn't there, then you in the Bay Area or elsewhere in the United States would be taking the brunt.
Would be the targets, yes. Okay, well, that raises the other question is, why does this flawed concept keep resurrecting itself?
Because Americans, in their fundamental good natures, have a great difficulty accepting a situation that has no solution. How many times have I heard people say to me, especially Americans, but there must be a solution. There must be. People only sit and talk to one another.
Right.
I was reading an editor in the New York Times 2 days ago, which talked about a possible solution to the Iranian nuclear problem, and they were basically saying again that the United States and the West should tell the Iranians in no uncertain terms that if you suspend enriching uranium, then we will offer you a tremendous amount of incentives. We'll help you develop peaceful nuclear power. Outside those areas. Breaks on trade. And the article concluded by saying this is Hezbollah, a last great opportunity for Iranian leadership to do something good for its people, to assure their economic well-being and their social development, which is a wonderful, wonderful piece of Americana, because it assumes that the leaders in Iran, that's at the top of their agenda, is assuring the economic well-being and the social development of the people, and not, say, assuring that their women are wearing full-body burqas and that they achieve a bomb that will give them regional domination and able to carry out a global jihad. That the Americans insist, they have this very deep need to insist that people around the world are just like them. There's an element of arrogance in it, you should know.
Yes, well, that's a very important point. We impose our presumptions about the world upon them, and then we have trouble when they don't think the way we do.
Right.
Okay, so another piece of bad news. Okay, let's turn to good news. Your new book is about to appear, and I was lucky enough to buy a copy, Power, Faith, and Fantasy, America in the Middle East. Now, in part of that book, you deal with an issue which has become very important recently, which is the Walt Mearsheimer very long article regarding the condemnation of Jewish dynamics in American politics with special focus on AIPAC. Tell us a little bit about your perception of the Walt Mearsheimer article and the whole concept which has come to the fore in modern American politics of a cabal of Israeli, Jewish, neocons, whatever, running American foreign policy to make it accommodate Israeli priorities.
I think it has to be said that there's a problem with two professors, by the way, both of Germanic background, publishing a paper that alleges that there's an amorphous, rather sinister conspiracy of Jews and pro-Jewish elements that have control over the press, control over finances. Does this sound vaguely familiar to you?
Yes.
That is getting innocent American boys to leave Arkansas to die for the Jews.
Die for the Jews
in Iraq. Without going too deeply into it, I think this is there's a great sense of deja vu surrounding this paper.
Yeah, this is a very traditional anti-Semitic canard.
America is losing a war in Iraq, and Walter Mearsheimer have come up with this entirely unique notion of blaming the Jews.
Yes.
It's immensely inventive.
Yes, it's comical, and yet at the same time it's terribly dangerous.
Precisely what was said about Roosevelt by the America First group in World War II. They talked the same thing about Wilson in World War I. It is as old as the hills. Now, having said that, This article, the Israel lobby, has gained increasing credence within the media. Media now refers to it as a legitimate paper in academia. Last semester, I was teaching at Harvard at the time when this paper came out, and the Middle East Studies department at Harvard actually posted the paper on its website and made it recommended reading for its students. They've never done that with any other paper. So we're supposed to talk about good news.
Yeah, I thought, I was hoping.
Now, Farrar, Straus & Giroux, one of America's preeminent presses, have offered for us, Walter Meir-Sheimer, a $750,000 contract to transform their paper into a full-length book, which is likely to be read by a million
people. They're pretty confident it will be a bestseller.
Oh, certainly.
Yes.
I said it will vie with Jimmy Carter's book on Israel as an apartheid state. We're going through an extremely rough time. This is interesting that even after Israel has withdrawn unilaterally on two borders, whereas made an offer to the Palestinians to create a Palestinian state, has tried repeatedly.
Yes.
It is actually precisely at this time where American elements in American academia and the media are launching a full-scale assault on the very idea of a Jewish state, not on this border or that border, really calling Israel's legitimacy as a nation in question. Yeah. And in many ways, I believe, as someone who teaches in this country and works in these fields, that this is one of the great threats that we face.
Yes.
In many ways, a thornier threat than those we even face from Iran.
Yes, well, okay. I thought we were opening up for some good news, but never mind.
The good news is that I personally engaged in developing departments of Israel studies in this country, and there are tremendous resources that are now being made available for this, and so that students 5-10 years from now will not have to face the type of loneliness that they face on campuses today. They won't be the only voices, and they won't have to go, they'll be able to go into classrooms where they'll be able to hear courses about Israel that are not propaganda about Israel, but tell a balanced story about Israel.
Precisely. The classroom as indoctrination versus the classroom as a place of study and learning. Well, yeah, I think that's an extremely important point. It seems as though the Walt Mearsheimer and also the Carter book are so far behind the curve in terms of developments toward peace in the Middle East that they're being written without any concern for the peace process itself, but rather simply to demonize Israel, simply to
It seems to me that when Jimmy Carter comes out and says that Hamas hasn't killed anybody in the last 5 years.
Yes, I was rather surprised about that myself.
He says that Arafat was never engaged in terror. We're now well out of the realm of even pseudo-scholarship, or well into the realm of fantasy. And what that fantasy serves, other than to take out Jimmy Carter's particular angst against the Jewish state and perhaps the Jewish people, I can't see. What I think is here's the good news. And the good news, David, is that in spite of this all-out assault on the idea of a Jewish state by leading professors, by former politicians, that American support for the state of Israel is at an unprecedented level. Unprecedented level. In 1948, 1 out of 2 Americans supported the creation of a Jewish state. In 2006, 70% of the American public was solidly pro-Israel.
That is certainly good news. One of the concerns I have, though, both about Carter's book and about the Walt Mearsheimer future book, is that they do have a level of legitimacy and credence because of their authors and because of the credence that's given to them by their publishers and by all the people who buy them. And therefore, they make their way onto the campuses and into the journalists. And this year's sophomore is next year's senator. With the influence that these books wield, however fantasy and fiction they may be, they grip their readers, their uneducated readers into this issue, with the belief that Israel is a demonic country, and that is the belief that people in 20 years will carry to the Congress and the Senate and to university classrooms. I couldn't agree with you more. Because that's basically the chief motivation of my life at this point.
Last semester, I taught simultaneously at Harvard and Yale. Returning to Yale next year, and probably my next book will be a general history of Israel. All of these decisions are motivated by the need to address those 10, 20 students, particularly at these elite universities, who someday may be leading this country.
Yes.
And at neither of these universities, neither Harvard or Yale, was there any good course on Israel. Certainly a balanced course. I also taught America and the Middle East there. But my purpose is not just for myself to reach them, but to create a generation of scholars who will go on and then have a multiplier effect.
Yes, exactly.
And that will be the answer, because right now we do not have on campus an answer to Walton Mearsheimer and Jimmy Carter.
Exactly. Okay. We need to change topics a little bit because we're running out of time, and I have one more question I want to be sure that we address. You wrote a very important article in Wall Street Journal just a couple of weeks ago, which was called Abba Omet.
They called it. I don't.
They,
I don't,
no,
I
you
don't
don't
sign
have
the
to
title.
Right, okay. Basically what you explained is that it is highly unlikely that President Bush will be supportive of an Israeli strike to neutralize Iran's weapons of mass destruction capacity. And in light of what I perceive to be rather disappointing results from Bush's meetings just recently in Amman, what are Israel's options and what are America's options with regard to Iran now?
No, to be exact, I didn't say that Bush was highly unlikely to support it. I said he was highly likely to give a public green light to it.
Okay.
He might have implicitly said, you know, here's your yellow light, go ahead. But he's in a situation today because of Iran, because of the loss in the congressional elections,
Yes.
that he cannot give that green light. And that evoked for me the situation that obtained on the eve of the Six-Day War,
Right.
when Abu Eban, then the Foreign Minister of Israel, came to then President Johnson and asked for American help in support against the threat posed by Nasser and the Arab armies. And Johnson was in a similar situation. He was bogged down in Vietnam.
Right.
He was losing. He was sort of hemorrhaging political power and couldn't come out openly and say, go attack Egypt. He sort of said, you know, go attack Egypt, with a wink. Israel, keep in mind, unlike the United States, which is not threatened existentially by Iran, Israel most emphatically is. We have a genocidal, anti-Semitic regime in Tehran that wants to nuclearize, that makes no attempt to dissemble its urge, its need to eliminate the Jewish state. We can't afford it. We've seen this scenario before. We're not going to sit passively and let it happen. I believe, and I say this, I'm not spoken for the Israeli government, I'm not privy to any classified information, is that Israel will wait to see whether international diplomacy can affect any change in Tehran. I'm skeptical that it will. And ultimately, if Iran is reaching the point of no return, the point where it is enriching uranium and it is preparing fissionable material for weapons, then Israel will act unilaterally to assure its survival.
That was David's interview with Michael Oren. He covered quite a bit of information there. One of the things that I think is pretty important is this concept that the road to Baghdad is through Jerusalem, meaning that progress has to be made in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict before progress can be made in Iraq. I think what's going on is that the United States is in a lot of trouble in Iraq, and it's trying to get the Arab states to help, and the Arabs are saying, if you want our help in Iraq, you've got to do something for us, and what we want from you is to put pressure on Israel.
Yes. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The whole issue of the road to Baghdad goes through Jerusalem is so inconsistent with political, military, cultural reality, not to mention geographic reality, that it should be clear that this is like a concept which is in friction, so to speak, with what's actually going on. And part of it is that the Arab countries, which see themselves as, I would say, in partial conflict with the USA, they need USA markets, they want USA support in some things, but at the same time, they want to achieve one of their agendas, which is the destruction of Israel, so they can use the leverage that this concept gives them to push America to press Israel. But what American professors and journalists and presidents should be saying is, number one, exactly what Professor Oren said is correct. The Arab-Israel conflict is not amenable to solution via pressure from the USA, because it's not Israel that is standing in the way of a solution. The Palestinians have been offered their own state literally 15 times since 1937, and every time they've turned it down with violence, terrorism, war, threats of genocide.
It doesn't seem that they want to solve the problem other than
to destroy Israel. Right. So pressing on Israel to make more concessions has consistently proven to be a useless exercise.
Now, why this obsession with Israel? I mean, it's a small country, and not all these Arab states border Israel. I mean, Iraq is not so close. I mean, how does Israel's existence threaten Iraq?
It doesn't threaten Iraq, but there's a concept in Islamic theology which says that once a territory has gone under Muslim sovereignty, it can never leave Muslim sovereignty. And if it does leave Muslim sovereignty, then the entire Muslim world needs to rise up and destroy that sovereignty and bring that country back into Muslim sovereignty.
But what price do you pay in terms of your own development? Does that become an obsession? There are lots of areas that Muslims controlled in the past that they don't control today.
Yes, but here comes element number 2. In the Muslim world, based upon the Quran and the Sunnah, the Hadith, the whole theology of Islam as it developed from Muhammad's time onward, the Jew and the Christian occupied places of very low social consequence. They were dhimmi, in other words, second or third class citizens. And the Quran is very clear, Islamic tradition is very clear. A Muslim should not be subordinated to a non-Muslim. Now here we have Jewish sovereignty. Well, Jewish sovereignty is the opposite from the Muslim point of view of where the Jew should be. He should not be sovereign. He should be subordinated. So the existence of Israel as a state is a threat to one of the cornerstone concepts of Islamic religious theology. Therefore, there is no choice but to eliminate the state.
Now, do they consider deceit to be a legitimate weapon? If this is based on a religious concept, wouldn't a religion say that, well, if you have a legitimate complaint, make a legitimate complaint, but if you invent falsehoods to slander people, then you're going beyond the requirements of your religion?
Well, as with pretty much any country at war, deceit, tricking the enemy, false fronts, all sorts of things that you use to try and gain advantage, they're all legitimate weapons. And certainly in Islam, there's no difference. In fact, Muhammad is credited with saying that a war is deceit. It's not in the Quran, it's in the extra-Quranic literature. But that's something that's ascribed to him. So they make up whatever they have to demonize Israel and justify the terrorism.
Well, Israel has always taken the position that there has to be a peaceful solution. The problem has to be resolved peacefully. Not every conflict has a peaceful solution. The problem of the Nazis didn't have a peaceful solution.
That's correct. And that's part of the reason that Professor Oren said they can only manage the problem, because Israel cannot defeat the entire Arab and certainly not the entire Muslim world. So as long as we have an Iran which wants to drop an atom bomb on Israel, there's no way that we can defeat Iran, although we can manage the conflict by interfering with their weapons of mass destruction.
I think we brought out some really good information on this show, but we have to wrap up now because we are out of time. I'm Marty Wasserman with David Meir-Levi. If you'd like to learn more about this program or any of our shows, you can visit our website, spotlight.deeperlook.net. Thank you for watching. Tuning in next time.
I didn't remember Susan, the woman on the jury from Palo Alto. Reminded me that
No shortage of guns for the Palestinians. The Palestinians, since the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, have smuggled in vast numbers of weapons, incalculable amounts of ammunition, high explosives,